Hello.
Hi, is that Kate?
Yes, speaking.
Kate, it's Laura. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to speak to you.
Sorry about last week.
Oh, don't. Oh, my God.
My head was in a complete fog.
Oh, don't worry.
No, sorry.
Becky's here as well on the call.
Hello, Kate. Nice to meet you.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. We're really excited to speak to you today.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much. How was Harry Styles, by the way?
Oh my gosh, he was amazing.
Oh my God.
But just so annoying because it was so far back and they're just like dots, aren't they?
Yeah.
But it was good. It was good.
Good. Oh, it feels like everyone has been to see him recently. Like everyone I know has been like, I'm off to see Harry tonight. I'm so jealous.
Yes, I think there's so many concerts out there. There's Depeche Mode as well. Everyone seems to be going to it at the moment.
There's Pink. Beyonce,
I know.
Coldplay.
I did Coldplay last year.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, they're amazing, aren't they?
I love Coldplay. Love me.
Yeah.
I like film music as well, and they came out to the ET theme tune, didn't they? Did they do that when you were there?
They did.
I was actually crying before they even started singing. I was like,
know.
oh my God, it's ET and it's Chris Martin and
They're brilliant. He's very, very handsome as well.
I know. Yeah. I reckon if you met him in real life, it'd be like, take your breath away a bit.
Yeah, I think so.
So basically, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's just going to be
my pleasure.
Like a really kind of informal chat. What Becky and I have done for our podcast over summer, we've called it the Summer Wellness Series. And we've had like a confidence coach on, a therapist, a nutritionist, a cold water expert as well. And it's kind of aimed at women between like 35 upwards, basically. So obviously I've been following you on Instagram for ages, and I was like, I wonder if I message you if you would come on. So I'm so pleased you have.
No, well, thank you for asking.
You're doing so well, by the way, aren't you, on Instagram? You are.
I hate Instagram.
Do you actually?
Do you? Why do you hate it, Kate?
Oh, do you know what? I have a love-hate relationship with it because I feel I like battling the algorithms is a real schlep. Yeah. And also, I don't think that I'm, and you know, you can quote me on this. I don't feel like a following necessarily is representative of one's expertise. Yeah. And I just think there's so much misinformation out there, and a lot of people just jump automatically to, you know, larger accounts, thinking, oh, well, they must know what they're talking about. Yeah. And I've seen and I see so many women who are so confused by what they need to be doing because they're like, oh, well, I listened to that person and they've got that amount of following, and it's like, well, that's not necessarily the way. And I hate reels, you know, and you have to do reels. And I look, you know, it's the way of spreading, you know, empowering and educating, and it helps obviously grow my business. But you know, I'm almost 50. I'm on the latter side, heading up to my 50s. You know, and social media is such an alien thing as well for me. Like I just can't, you know, getting your head around how it all works is really difficult.
It's time consuming as well, isn't it?
We're kind of the same. We have a love-hate relationship with it, don't we? I feel like probably most people do.
Yeah.
Okay,
so what we're going to do then is we'll just start and kind of introduce you, and then we're just going to talk about like what you do, maybe a bit of advice, you know, for women in their 40s, you know, perimenopausal women, how they should act, you know, that kind of stuff. So we'll just have a chat. It's very, very laid back. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine, not a problem.
Perfect. So what we're actually going to do is we'll put the intro on after we've spoken to you. So we'll just go straight into it. Do you want to do the intro?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Kate, are you happy to be introduced as a menopause fitness coach or just fitness coach?
Yeah. That's fine. Menopause fitness coach, either. Not a problem.
Amazing. Okay, let's do it. So another episode and another guest who we're very excited to get on. Today we have got the lovely Kate Rowe Ham. I think I'm saying that right, Kate. Who is a menopause fitness coach. We are giddy to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very, very excited to chat to you both.
So I've been following you on Instagram, I think probably for about, I think it's about 3-4 years. I don't know how you came up. I think you must have just popped up on my Instagram and I thought, I'm going to follow you. And I love your content, Kate, because it's very real. It's not, you know, I don't want to say unfiltered, but you just kind of like say it as it is and you're really easy to kind of watch. What's your background, Kate? How did you kind of get into it?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's an extra question. Funnily enough, do you know what? My account started off being called HIT for Life. And it started off when I had qualified as a PT and I'd had my third child, sort of quite a few years after my middle one. So sort of my eldest was 10, my middle child was 7, and then I had Rupert. So there was quite an age gap, and I was an older mum. I mean, in actual fact, I think on my hospital notes, they called me a geriatric mum after the age of 35. Yeah.
God.
Slight insult there, but there we go. Don't get me started. And I wanted to work out. I've always liked exercise, but, you know, and I'm sure I'll come on to this, I've always seen it as a sort of a means to an end, and that end always being sort of like a weight-related goal or shape and a size, which has never done me any good mentally in terms of the way I think I've viewed myself. And so after my third child, I was like, right, I want to get back in shape. And I don't think I was particularly out of shape, but I couldn't find anybody that was really relatable to a busy mum, juggling a house, 2 kids, a baby, and sort of living in the middle of nowhere, no access, in fact, to a gym, no childcare. So how do I do this? The only person I did find was the lovely Joe Wicks, who I think is brilliant. And he's actually been a really lovely champion of what I do and a supporter. But still, for me, it just, you know, he didn't have the same life constraints, I guess, that I had. So although I enjoyed the workouts, I just struggled to find the relatability there. And I actually thought, okay, what are you going to do when the kids are grown up? Where's this going to go? And I love sport. So I literally set out to qualify as a personal trainer when I had a newborn baby. So there's kind of a twofold thing there, which is A, it's never too late to start something new in your 40s. So go for it if that is you. And that's sort of what I did. So late to the game in qualifying as a PT, but went for it. But at the same time as qualifying, and my account being called HIT for Life, because I was like going to just help women and inspire women, and it was all about HIT at the time, you know, get these short, quick, effective workouts in because that's the best way. Menopause sort of crept in. So I was there doing lots of HIT workouts, managing a small child, and my body something didn't seem to do what it wanted to do. And I was having all these various symptoms. And I began to slowly realise, I'll go into more depth, that I was going through perimenopause, and worked out that HIT wasn't the right thing for me to do. So subsequently did a lot of research, did some qualifications in menopause. There are lots out there. When I say qualifications in menopause, I mean in how to train and what we should be doing, because you don't do that when you do your level 3 PT. And just turned it to Kate RH Fitness and sort of grew essentially from there. That was the short version.
Yeah, so many questions.
We're literally looking at each other here, Kate, like, yep, we're writing notes, like so many things to ask.
Okay, so first question to ask you then, because I think this is a really, really good question. How did you know you were in perimenopause? What were your symptoms? What was your body saying to you?
That's a really good question, because I think, again, sort of the misinformation and the myth that, you know, you're going to have hot flush and you're going to be like, okay, that's menopause. I didn't have that at all. My biggest symptoms were actually more, I guess, more sort of with my mental health than anything. In terms of my physical health, I definitely had more aches and pains, specifically in the back of my neck, which obviously when you're, you know, a fitness instructor can be quite limiting. But with my breathlessness, my anxiety, and then feeling actually very, very alone in a very, very chaotic world. And I always feel like I'm insulting my family or my husband when I say that, because it makes it sound like they weren't supportive of me. But they were. I just felt very isolated, even though I was managing everybody else. I think it's that sort of thing where we do as midlife women, whether we're parents or not, I don't think that matters. We put everybody else first, and it just sort of hit me. And like I say, I just felt very alone. Like it was almost like part of being a WhatsApp group, and the messages were pinging in, and I was replying, but no one was responding to my messages, but they were responding to everybody else's. And that is often the thing with menopause, that isn't happening, but that's the way you see it, because it kind of that anxiety and depression slightly creeping up. I think also I had terrible, terrible night sweats, like proper t-shirt changing night sweats. And that was obviously really attractive. But again, I didn't know what it was. And it clashed with lockdown, or the first lockdown. And so I remember calling my GP and, saying I'm experiencing all this. And I suppose at the time I had, a 2-year-old or 3-year-old who there was no homeschooling for him because he was too young. The other two were being homeschooled, a husband trying to work. And, I worked out I was cooking 15 meals a day and trying to hold my own business together. So my GPs were like, well, you're just depressed and you're not sleeping. And, my dad had been diagnosed with cancer. But I, having had a history of mental health before, I knew that this wasn't depression, and I would not be embarrassed of the diagnosis of depression. So it wasn't that. I just knew it was something different. And sadly, my GP wasn't able to diagnose that. So I did have to go privately.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about your symptoms. And thank you, by the way, for being so open about it, because it's, it's not always the easiest thing to talk about, even though it is a bit more talked about these days.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Laura and I have been having very open conversations about it, and with various women as well, because there's not actually a test, is there, to go, you are in perimenopause or you're going through the menopause. So it's kind of like figuring it out yourself, isn't it? Which I think is why it's so confusing.
Yeah, completely. I mean, there are ways of finding out whether you are, but again, sort of what I was saying, there's a lot of misinformation, and there are various people saying, if you do this test or that test, in particular, sometimes a finger prick test, and you can test your hormones. Those aren't really an indication, and I'm not medical. I have to make that very clear. But from the enormous amount of work that I do in this field, what I know is that NICE guidelines suggest that over the age of 45, you shouldn't need to have a blood test, and you can very much go on your symptoms. So there is something called the Green Climeric Scale, and I think that is a print off, and you can check your symptoms on that, and you make your appointment with your GP. You should theoretically be able to go to your GP with that if you are over the age of 45 and say, I think I'm in perimenopause. These are my symptoms. What can I do? If you are under the age of 45, it is a little bit more complicated. It shouldn't be. And I suppose I was 44. Actually, I was 42. But so they do want to do blood tests. But again, if your hormones are in that roller coaster mode of going up and down, if they test you at a time when you're, ovulating, your estrogen is going to be high, the likelihood is you're going to get a reading that wouldn't suggest you were in perimenopause. If you had a reading, a couple of weeks later, 3 weeks later, when you were about to have a period, your estrogen would be really low, and therefore you may, within that same cycle, get a diagnosis of perimenopause under the age of 45. So it is a really difficult thing, I think, for doctors to diagnose on a blood test if you're under the age of 45, and equally because there isn't much education in menopause when you train to become a GP. That doesn't really help people have access to a diagnosis.
I think the whole thing is so confusing.
It's a lot,
It's a lot. Like the hormone names I can't even pronounce sometimes. I'm like progesterone and oh my God, it's like, yeah. But so let's talk about perimenopause and also like fitness, the correlation, because obviously that's where you come in. So how important is exercise in perimenopause? Actually, in your 40s, how important is it?
Like, without doubt, the most important thing, and I know that people will, there's a lot of discussion, HRT being sort of the first line treatment, being the silver bullet. So, I totally get that. If there is a woman who is got crippling joint aches and pains, has got very low motivation and can't get herself to move, I absolutely understand that there's a case for that in order to build up that relationship with exercise. But equally, we kind of need to think about getting to a place where we are having intervention before we get to that point. And had I known in my 30s, I mean, I always say this and then I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't have done, would I? Because we all think we're invincible. But had I sort of maybe in my 30s realised the impact of menopause and how I could manage my symptoms through training correctly, I would have possibly started to implement those things a little bit earlier. For a lot of women, the menopause, perimenopause wouldn't hopefully literally hit them, out of the blue. Because I think we are a society now where we do look for quick fixes. That sort of hit, quick fix, short workout is something that we all seem to be, turning to. But actually, what we should be thinking really from the age of 30 plus is to be adding strength training to our workouts. In particular for sort of what I call the silent symptoms of menopause, which is our bone health and our heart health, and our joint health. We really need to be lifting weights. So I would say to any woman, listening, if you're 30, 35, start doing strength training twice a week, and do the HIIT if you love it. Like, obviously, the most important thing is to find movement that you love and enjoy. But just to be really mindful that a lot of women I see come to me with crippling joint aches and pains, and it's because they're doing too much HIIT. They're not resting enough and they're not lifting. And that was, I definitely fell into that category. And then that often, if you've got a woman that's sort of in that mindset, they seem to cut out really large, important food groups as well in order to manage sort of inevitable weight gain for a lot of women that comes again with perimenopause. So it's a really difficult time because it's so multifactorial as well, because you're then doing the HIIT, you're stressing your body with extra cortisol, your body's under stress already because there's a decline in estrogen. So there, as you said, it's really confusing and there is a lot going on. But the point is that if we have these conversations and if we give women the access to this information, they can start to begin to manage their symptoms. And as I say, if we do it early enough, they could manage their menopause, potentially symptom-free by making these lifestyle choices.
Kate, just going back to something you said quickly, you said about doing strengthening things. What exactly do you mean by that?
So lift and go heavy. No, well, I do. I think that's really good for your mental health as well. Like we always worry, don't we, with conscious weights that we're going to bulk up and we're not going to bulk up unless we are on a particular diet and training, a certain way. But essentially, I mean, using more than your body weight. So again, getting and investing in some dumbbells and adding those to your squats, or adding those to, instead of doing push-ups, do a bent over row so that you're challenging the muscle more, you're challenging your bones more. We reach our bone density, in fact, peaks at the age of 30. So for those of us, myself included, that partied hard and had a very colourful, wonderful life up until the age of 30, although it was good, we may have been doing ourselves a little bit of injustice. From the age of after the age of 30, your bone density declines, so you're kind of breaking down your bone at a bigger rate than you're building it. So by adding strength training, you are going to be building and strengthening your bones, which can hopefully prevent the onset of osteopenia and osteoporosis, which is brittle bones, and actually sort of has quite high morbidity rates amongst women. If they were to have a fall and they were to get a fracture, they become immobile, and that can lead kind of to other health conditions. So I kind of talk a lot about future-proofing your body. So that's kind of the way to do it. But look, you and I know that, I've got a 16-year-old child and a 14-year-old. If I was to say, listen, you need to start doing this so that when you're 40, this doesn't happen, they're literally going to put two fingers up at me and go, whatever. Because you just can't get it. And I totally appreciate that. But I think if we can keep trying to have these conversations, at some point the penny does drop. So for any woman out there who isn't lifting, A, thinks it's too late or it won't have an impact, it really can. And I did a post recently, I've got a diagnosis of osteopenia actually in both my hips, which doesn't come as a surprise when I think about my past, but does come as a surprise because I have been lifting weights. But I can prevent any more degradation of that, and I can prevent the onset of osteoporosis. So for me, very much lifting weights and going heavy, and by that I mean, progressing with those weights. So adding weights each session, not immediately each session, but over time, and building that strength is absolutely fundamental.
It's funny because over lockdown, I did lots of weight training. I didn't do any cardio. I hate doing cardio.
Oh my God, so do I.
But I loved it. And it's so annoying because I've never felt fitter and healthier and more awake and more alert and blah, blah, blah. And obviously went back to work and I stopped. And it's really annoying because I know it makes such a difference to me. And I was only doing I think maybe 20 minutes in the morning. And then if I felt like it, I'd do like another 15 minutes at night. Didn't do it like loads, but it made such a difference. So, but it's just like sometimes work and kids and this and that, you're just like, oh, I haven't got time. But you don't need to work out for a long time, do you?
Oh my goodness, no, not at all. And that's the thing. Actually, a lot of the workouts, I try and do most of the workouts sort of on the app under 40 minutes or 40 minutes or thereabouts. And actually you could, as you say, break those up. But what's really interesting to pick up on your point there is sort of that cardio thing, that actually weights is cardio. And I know that, again, a lot of people out there who are perhaps more sort of, sports scientists, it's always one to debate and would happily, probably tear my theory apart. But it's not just my theory, it's a lot of other people's theories. If you are lifting weights that are heavy enough, you will elevate your heart rate. You will push your heart rate up. So therefore it can be considered, lifting weights is considered cardio. Yeah. I get it. It's not running. It's not whatever, which also does have its place. But you can be as equally fit and strong just from lifting weights. And it's funny because I do love running, and I've done a few marathons, and like in my 20s, and I was obviously marathon training, and like I said earlier in the conversation, using exercise to a means to an end and pounding the pavement. I ran a great marathon time in my 40s. I've run equal marathon times from walking and lifting weights and doing the odd run, but not doing those long runs and those continual runs, which actually would have a detrimental or do have a detrimental effect on my body. But I have felt just as strong and equal. And as I say, my time represents that from lifting weights and walking rather than just, running and doing it straight that way.
And can I ask about what effect? So obviously you were perimenopausal, your mental health and your aches and night sweats. How are you managing that now? Is it like gone or like how?
No, no, it's always a moving target. And that is the thing, isn't it? I think that's the people. I think that again is sort of some of this myth, but it's like, right, if you do that, it's all going to go away. And it's not, it's not like a paracetamol where you take it and your headache goes. It is continually moving. So, sort of as a more direct answer to your question, I do take HRT, and I mainly will always take HRT for as long as I can in terms of my bone health, because that added estrogen that I am taking will provide, according to research, a more preventative and protective element to my bone health. So for me, that's sort of the reason I will continue to take the HRT. In terms of my mental health, I stopped drinking because I think it's really important for us all to know that you can take HRT and you can just still have the symptoms unless you make fundamental lifestyle changes. It's not, you're not going to take HRT and it's all going to go away. You have to look at what you can do on a day-to-day basis in terms of helping the HRT work better. I kind of see it as a three-pronged approach with HRT, diet, and exercise. And I would always start with exercise and diet and see how you are, do your symptoms ease from that? And if they do, great. If they don't, then, in your day-to-day life is impacted, then definitely there's a case for HRT. But, we have to remember there are women going through surgical menopause, medical menopause, early menopause, and, they might not be able to take HRT because of their if they've had a diagnosis of cancer. So we want to make it all inclusive. So kind of what is the thing that you can do to help yourself with menopause that everybody has access to, that absolutely, regardless of your medical situation, what can you do? And that is, you can manage your diet and you can manage your exercise. And those are the conversations that I want to see people having. And that HRT just happens to be, a little bonus if you can take it and if you want to take it.
Yeah, it's Fascinating.
Isn't it? We are literally taking so many notes here. Kate, for somebody who's perhaps listening who doesn't really do any exercise at all at the moment, you were talking earlier about kind of like, you know, the strengthening and times and things. What would you recommend they start doing on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually one I get an awful lot. I think if they're coming from a complete beginner level, is first and foremost not to be afraid, because I think that stops a lot of people from starting. And you know, you procrastinate, so they've got all the good intentions to do it, and then they're like, oh, and they just can't do it. So I think don't be afraid. Just start by walking. You know, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, and then build up. So do that for 1 week. The next week, add 5 minutes and start getting that heart pumping. You know, you're loosening those joints, you're getting the muscles working, and literally start with walking if you're starting from scratch. And don't expect too much too soon. And I think that's the other thing that we do. We place really unrealistic, unsustainable expectations on ourselves. So it'd be like, right, I'm going to go and do that. And then you expect to just hop up and run and 5K the next day, or be able to pick up a set of weights and be able to lift that. And then you ache, and then that's it. You kind of just think, well, I'll stop that. I'm not going to do that again. So don't be afraid. Start really slowly. And actually, I do have a 4-week beginner's guide on the app that people can do. And that's 4 workouts a week. Lifting, I ask you to start with sort of 3 kg weights and 5 kg weights. But I think that a lot of people will be really surprised actually at how strong they are, because again, that's something that we do as women. We continually sort of undermine ourselves, and we put ourselves down, and we belittle ourselves. Well, I'm not strong enough to lift that. Like, you are strong enough to lift that. You're just telling yourself you're not. So just always try and have a positive conversation with yourself that you can start, you are strong, and to not be afraid.
Great advice. That's great advice. Right. So we've talked about your app. So where can people, because I think a lot of people are going to be like, right, I need to follow Kate and find her. So where can people find you?
So really annoyingly, as much as I love Instagram, as I was saying, I have 2 accounts to manage. So there's my sort of personal account, which is more my journey and sort of a bit more family life, and that's KateRH_fitness. And then sort of more of the stuff about the app and the trainers that are there is Owning Your Menopause, and that's on Instagram. And obviously I'm really happy, and we can talk about this to give your listeners, like any discount, a discount code, if they wanted like 25% off an annual membership. We could give your listeners that. I can get that over to you to include in whatever it is that you want to send out. But there is also like a 7-day free trial on all of the subscriptions. So, people can come in and have a little nosy and see what it's about and see if it's for them. And to mention, it's not just about strength training. There is bar, Pilates, yoga. I have a GP. There's nutritional support, advice and guidance. So it's kind of like your one-stop shop to managing your menopause.
That's amazing. Kate, thank you so much for coming on, and also thank you for being so kind of open and honest. I think it's just really interesting for people, isn't it, when someone's just really open. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No, well, thank you very much for having me. It's been lovely to talk to you both.
Nice to speak to you, Kate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, that was brilliant.
That was so good.
Sorry,
So
I can't just talk and talk and talk. I'm not going to go stop.
That's literally what
perfect.
we want. Yeah. We kind of wanted the guests to come on, and we sort of sit back and you guys just go for it. That was so good. Thank you.
Yeah, can we do that?
And I'll give you. Yeah, I'll give you a discount code.
Yeah,
so
brilliant.
I could do like if I set one up like Laura and Becky 25.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll tag you in when we upload it and kind of put it all together. Obviously, we'll send you a clip as well, and we'll tag you in it too. But yeah, oh my God, that would be brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Love it.
I'll get them to set that up now, and then when they've done that, I'll ping that across.
Yeah, you're a star. Thank
Amazing.
you
Thank
so
you,
much.
No, not a problem.
Lovely
Take
to talk
care.
to you. Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
Bye. Bye, Kate.